Afternoon, everybody. Yes, thanks, John. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Chris, for great summaries of the work that you guys are doing as well. As John touched on, my name is Stephen Good. I'm Chief Exec at Best, formerly Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. Thrilled to be here for the last couple of days to engage with a whole bunch of different people who are doing some amazing stuff. And as Chris touched on, I think that message of one size fits all is also kind of underwritten by you guys are knocking it out the park already. I think in terms of some of the really great work that Scotland, the rest of the world probably as well, but Scotland needs to learn from. So big takeaway for us, and we kind of knew this on the way in. We'd been well briefed, but we knew that climate driven, obviously. I don't mean in the wider sense of climate change, but immediate climate focused solutions are really important in terms of making sure buildings are functioning properly in this sort of climate, and making sure that they're delivering the sort of performance that you're after. And those are the sort of things that are really important in the wider sense of driving towards the net zero solutions that we have to find. So listen, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Best, because I appreciate that we've been supported with colleagues at Highlands and Islands Enterprise and others on the island to come and showcase a little bit of what we've been doing. I hope you've had a chance to engage with some of the team who have brought some of the kit along. Some of the things that we're starting to engage with other contractors, other designers, other people that work across the built environment space right across Scotland. So some of it might be relevant today, some of it might be relevant in a couple of years' time, who knows. But it's about, as others have touched on, it's about collaboration, it's about knowledge exchange, it's about sharing. So a big part of us coming and meeting with you guys and spending some time on the island is to really get a better understanding of what we can then do in terms of taking back the outputs from this. What can we do to really help support Shetland develop and deliver an even better solution in terms of net zero? So a little part of how we do that hopefully will make sense once I give you the context of the slides, of which I have got way too many slides, as I've been told by everybody. So I'm going to do a bit of a probably quantity over quality, so apologies for that. But Built Environment Smart Transformation, so as John touched on, formerly Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, some of you might have heard of us in that context. We're part of a family of innovation centres, so there's 7 innovation centres that were set up back in 2014-15 by Scottish Government, Scottish Funding Council and Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, now South of Scotland Enterprise as well, part of that community, so all of the enterprise agencies. But the 7 of us work in different areas. We're the only team that's focused on construction and the built environment, but we do work quite closely with a number of the other innovation centres on a whole range of things. You can get to all of them via our website. If you want to find out more, please speak to us afterwards. Again, as John touched on earlier, the first time I think you heard Sarah talk was when we did our rebrand back in April of this year. And at that time, we had been working for a number of years, very focused in on all of the innovation work that we're doing to support businesses and work with academic partners and drive change across a whole range of different areas. Ultimately was focused on how do we decarbonise this, how do we make it more sustainable, how do we make it more circular, how do we make it less wasteful. All of those sort of things were huge kind of focus parts of the work that we were doing, and it felt right that at that point we think about how we evolve as an organisation. So Construction Scotland Innovation Centre as a name had served us particularly well, but it maybe didn't quite cover off the range of things that we were involved in doing. And with that sharper focus on how we made sure that everything we were doing going forwards was really hopefully encapsulated in that bottom line there. So our mission, accelerate built environment transition to zero carbon. We know we need to move at pace. Sarah's touched on some of the big numbers, some of the big graphs that put things into context, how aware we all are of what that means in the immediate kind of coming months, years. Who knows, but we know we need to move faster than we are at the moment, but we know that creates a lot of complexity in terms of how you do that, how does procurement work around that, how does funding work around that, how does the delivery model for a whole range of different things work. And part of our job at the Innovation Centre is to try and help not just develop the new products and systems, as you'll see in a minute, some of the tangible things we do in that sense, but also how do we help innovate around the business models and the service models and the procurement processes and all of those other things that sit around it. So really take that sort of system approach to a lot of these things. So that's kind of us. We are very focused on innovation though, as you can imagine, having been called an innovation centre and still functioning as an innovation centre. How we do that is across our connected ecosystem. So there's great stuff goes on across Scotland, across the UK, across the world, but often in little silos. So you get great pockets of great stuff happening, but no one else knows about it. So one of the big tasks that we've taken on board is how do we make sure as many people as possible can know about the good stuff that other people are doing, can learn from it, and can avoid perhaps having to make some of the same mistakes that others have made. So a big part is around how we kind of unlock innovation by really letting people see what else is going on out there and being aware of it. Our bread and butter is through collaborative projects and programmes, so we can support industry to work with other industry partners, industry to work with academic partners. We can put some support around that, sometimes funding into those sorts of things. We can unlock access to some of the equipment and technologies of the future that you might not want to go and buy, but you might want to use, almost in a try before you buy sort of model, and that's a big part of the Innovation Factory, which is the third part there, how we use that as a physical space for innovation support. So how can we bring industry partners together who think they might be interested in advanced manufacturing or robotics or something like that. They think that might work for them, but they're not going to go and spend £500,000 on the equipment to find out that it isn't, and it's not going to meet their clients' requirements. They can come and almost try before they buy, I suppose. So use that space as a place to do that. And underpinning all of that is a big focus on the talent that we need in our industry to do the stuff we're doing today, but also to take us on that journey to where we're going in the future. So looking very much at that future skills programme. So they're the kind of 4 core areas that we focus on in terms of our innovation support. I touched on it there. One of the greatest assets is that connected ecosystem. And for us, it's kind of made up of 4 components. I know there's only 3 there, but it makes sense in a second. So industry, academia and public sector individually can do different things, brilliant things sometimes in different ways. The real magic happens often when you get them working together, when you get them tackling these system scale problems in a joined up way. And the 4th part of that component is that's for all of us. So that's with citizens in mind in terms of how do we make the built environment better whilst we decarbonise it for all of us as citizens of Scotland, as citizens of the UK, citizens of this planet, to make sure that we've got the kind of right opportunities ahead for us, for everybody that comes after us. Impact is really important. So our team are full of impact managers. Impact managers are the people that run the programmes, the projects, and support all the various different things that we do. But we also deliver impact across a number of different other kind of aspects. So innovation I've touched on, that's hopefully a given for an innovation centre. We do work a little bit upstream with universities, often around their research stuff, so things that's maybe a little earlier in that kind of research phase, but will be relevant to industry either at a strategic level or at an individual business organisation level. We do a little bit of that. We're most interested in the end of that pipe where it's closer to the commercialisation bit, but we can travel up and down that whole space. System and service design, best example I can give you of the minute is I've spent 2.5 hours today on a call with the Construction Leadership Forum, which is chaired by the Business Minister, Ivan McKee, and it's trying to figure out one of the key things, which I'm sure we'll get a show of hands afterwards if you think this is relevant, but how do we fix construction procurement? Is that something we should be trying to fix? Quick show of hands. Who thinks yes? Yes. Now, that's one of those system-wide problems. It's not just a procurement problem for one hospital or one school or one house. It's an entire system-wide challenge that we need to figure out how that can be unpicked in terms of the challenges we have just now and put back together in a way that's actually delivering not just best cost outcomes, which is often what procurement is focused on, or lowest cost outcomes, but best value-based options from that point of view. And then you can define what does value look like if you're the client. Knowledge exchange, a little bit like that kind of ecosystem piece. How do we make sure that that information that's happening in great places is shared widely? That's our job, as well as to make sure that that's out there and available to everybody. And then the commercialisation bit I touched on. As an innovation centre, the major outcome we're focused on is how businesses can be more profitable, can be more productive, can create more jobs, can look at all these things in an economic sense. That's key. But we also focus very much on the environmental and social impact side of things as well. In terms of impact, that's the stats of the stuff that we've done to date. So that's kind of with the support of the team, access to the facility, the projects, the programmes, that sort of thing. There's some pretty big numbers up there in terms of new things that have kind of had an impact across businesses sometimes. Sometimes these are very specific to individual organisations. More of what we're doing now is more programme based. So how can we make sure that if we are supporting an intervention, that's going to have a benefit for an entire subsector of the industry rather than just one company, for example. That's a big focus of us moving forward. And as an organisation, we have 4 core areas that we focus on internally. So we have 4 teams that sit within the organisation that focused on digital transformation. So how do we use some of the stuff you've seen here today, digital enabling technology, to allow us to be a better industry? Modern methods of construction, advanced manufacturing, off-site manufacturing, that sort of stuff. How do we build things in different ways that's smarter, less wasteful, more sustainable, higher quality? All those sorts of things can be done sometimes through some of these measures. Retrofit, Sarah and others have spoken about the importance of that, and that is, in some respects, the kind of elephant in the room. It's relatively easy to new build things quite well. It's going to be a real challenge to get all of the existing buildings and all the different shapes and sizes they come in to the sort of standards that we need to get to. So that's a big focus for us. And then sustainability is really all the things you imagine that sit within that kind of operational carbon, embodied carbon, circular, as was touched on earlier by Chris. All those things sit within that space as well. And then we have 2 cross-cutting components to that. None of those things are really capable of being delivered unless we sort of change the way we think and behave around the built environment and construction as a kind of process, and then that zero carbon skills and competency pit as an underpinning. One of the things we have as a kind of asset is the innovation factory. So just outside Glasgow, just south east of Glasgow, we have actually have 2 now, but we have a 35,000 square foot shed that's full of all the sort of equipment. So the sort of stuff you see here is some of our mobile kit, but we have some other stuff that sits in that space that I think it was politely described as Willy Wonka's chocolate factory for the construction industry. So you kind of come there and you can use off-site manufacturing equipment, you can use robotics, you can use machinery that allows you to turn waste fibres into insulation, you can make CLT, cross-laminated timber. All these sorts of things were areas identified by industry as things that might be part of what our future looks like, but we're not going to go and buy it ourselves. But you guys can buy it and put it somewhere and we'll come and play with it. So it's a big sandpit, I suppose, for exploring how that technology might work. I appreciate it's not particularly handy being in the south side of Glasgow, but it is there and it is available. And if this works, don't work, no mind, I'm probably over time anyway. There's a wee video that just shows you some of the stuff that goes on there, but I'll leave these slides so you can see it. We are in a position now where we've been able to secure the building next door as well, and working with Scottish Government, who've partly supported the funding of that, we're going to be looking at how we can evolve that as a kind of national retrofit centre, so very much focused on the retrofit side of things. How do we bring together that community, the supply chains, the various different solutions? So again, back to that knowledge exchange and that kind of connected ecosystem piece. How do we make sure there's somewhere that everybody can get to, engage with and learn from in that sense? We operate, I suppose, at different levels, as you have to do as an organisation like ours. So at a strategic level, a tactical level, and then a very operational level. At a strategic level, we are part of a 26-strong international UN Centres of Excellence programme for high-performing buildings. So we've got a team that's supported by our academic partners and a range of others that works internationally with a whole range of other centres that do similar things to us. So they're in their community, in their country, they're building these networks, they're building these ecosystems, they're trialling things, they're figuring out what good looks like, and then they're trying to share that. We're part of that international sharing kind of experience. We work strategically with Scottish Government, so across all of the policy stuff that Chris has touched on, we're working with them around how to make sure that innovation sits at the heart of that. How do we make sure we're thinking about the best, smartest, quickest, safest, cleverest, most sustainable ways of driving some of these things forward. And at an industry leadership level, some of you will be familiar perhaps with the Construction Leadership Forum, which is the partnership effectively between Construction Industry Leadership Group and Scottish Government. We support that again as the kind of innovation team. And then, a little bit like Sarah has touched on earlier, we work with a whole bunch of different kind of advocates and supporters and partners and stakeholders who work with us. They're not part of the team necessarily, but they work with us. So we have over 70 members from across industry, academia, different places who are our Innovation Champions Network. You are all invited to become part of our Innovations Champion Network. It's a constantly growing and evolving team. And if you're young enough, you can also be part of our Built Environment Changemakers team. So it's effectively our kind of next generation of, often they've been described incorrectly in the past as the next generation of kind of future leaders. They're already leaders right now. They are driving change. They are creating impact in ways that a lot of us that have been doing this thing for years couldn't even dream of. So if you are at an early stage in your career and you want to get involved, the chair of that group sits on that board with Ivan McKee, the minister, for example. I never had that opportunity at that stage in my career. So we're taking the platform we have and making sure that other people can use it as effectively as they can. I'm going to skip through these really quick because you all know what the challenge is. We're a big industry, we're complex, we're fragmented, we employ lots and lots of people, and we do a lot of apprenticeship training. About the majority of the apprentices that are trained in Scotland are trained in the construction and built environment space, but we are fragmented and we are disjointed, and we have a lot of micro businesses, particularly in a Shetland context. You see that that are not getting the opportunities that they need to get because some of these systems, these things we need to fix, are not geared up the right way. At a UK level, and this is just around the existing built environment, so Sarah's sweet spot in terms of the existing infrastructure and buildings and whatnot that we need to retrofit to get to net zero. There's a lot of it. So the kind of pipeline of work down the road appears to be quite positive in that wider UK sense. But we know we are part of the problem. So others have touched on some of the figures earlier, so I'll rattle through. But we use a lot of energy, we produce a lot of emissions, we use a lot of materials, and we create a lot of waste. We need to figure out how to move that in a much more sustainable way, and we need to move at pace. And this was a quote that kind of stuck with us a little bit in terms of the speed and the pace we need to move at. I won't go into that in detail, but that sort of resonates with us a little bit, that we need to get to where we need to get to pretty damn quick. One of the things we've been developing to help us do that, to help industry do that, is this zero carbon transformation programme called Accelerate to Zero. So it's effectively think about it as the route map that will help us deliver the policy stuff that government talks about and take us from where we are as an industry to where we need to get to. There's a whole bunch of components to it. It's split up over a whole bunch of kind of time zones, so broadly five-year programmes. So we're a little bit into the first phase of this in terms of working it all out. And then it has a number of components that kind of sit together that broadly sit into those 4 overarching categories, but those 10 kind of components. Again, I won't go through them in details, but I'm happy to leave the slides and share them. And then a couple of quick examples of some of the stuff we've been doing to finish with. Transforming Timber is a programme we've been working on, and I say this with the irony collapsing off in my head that there's not many trees in Shetland, but in the rest of Scotland we have the majority of the productive forestry in the UK is in Scotland mainland. And we want to take that raw material, which is typically used for pallets and fence posts, if we're being honest, and take it right up the value chain. So how do we take it into higher value construction and other key applications? So that programme has been running for a number of years now and has delivered quite a lot of outputs. All of this stuff's on our website. You can go see all the case studies, you can read all the stats. Gen Zero is one of the programmes that sits within the Transforming Timber programme, which was for the Department for Education, the UK government, and it's effectively their Zero Carbon Schools programme, of which they wanted to place homegrown UK timber, possibly Scottish timber, at the heart of their structural solutions around cross-laminated components, but then recognised there isn't anywhere in the UK that you can actually manufacture that at scale. We've got a press in our factory, but it's not a commercial press, it's not big enough to do it. So the project that's spun out of that is to help establish, with some other commercial stakeholders, about £50 million worth of investment in Scotland for cross-laminated timber production, and that is, I'd say, with a decent wind behind it, about 2/3 of the way through that process at the moment, so more to come on that. Edinburgh Homes Demonstrator, I'm going to skip through as well. It is relevant because there's a pilot coming for this, which is in a rural context, but the bones of that are based on the pilot that was established between bringing together, and again, it is about net zero and it is about off-site manufactured timber frame homes, but actually it's a procurement innovation project, so again, there's some relevancies there, irrelevant of the building typology. Near homes, I don't know if this one will work, but if it does, we shall see. It does. Project that we were asked to support with Transport Scotland, who at the beginning of COVID were challenged with the fact that nobody was commuting to their work. Everybody was working from home, whether that was convenient or not, and they wanted to understand whether there was a way they could take, Scottish Government had announced their 20-minute neighbourhoods approach. So a lot of bits of Scotland are not particularly well connected. You don't have the opportunity to walk or cycle to all of the infrastructure that you need. So how could we help them retrofit buildings in existing locations that would be zero carbon, they would be healthy, they would be capable of being demounted, deconstructed, taken apart and moved somewhere else. And we helped a number of stakeholders develop this system, of which the prototype is now sitting in the Innovation Factory. It has been commercialised already, so Scottish Power have taken a number of those modules and developed training spaces out of them. And the company is now, that we've been working with on this, has now commercialised it with Transport for London are deploying it across a number of their locations with hard-to-treat retrofit solutions, but they wanted a kit of parts kind of approach to it, which this is, and also with Department for Education, not just on their new build programme, which is the Gen Zero one, but this has been deployed across their retrofit programme as well. I'll skip on very briefly because I'm conscious of time. AMCH, Advanced Industrialised Methods for the Construction of Homes, was a project we had the opportunity to work with Barrett and Stuart Milne, who are looking at that kind of mass industrialisation approach for house building. How do they deliver large-scale volume solutions in a more sustainable, more off-site, less wasteful, safer way? And this project has delivered a whole range of outputs on that front. Again, for the speed, I'll skip past just now and touch on very briefly our low carbon learning programme, which you'll have seen elements of. I'm sure the team have spoke to you about earlier, but placing that expertise around how do you build high quality buildings with appropriate materials in a really effective way when you can't reach into colleges potentially sometimes and have that expertise ready to deploy within your organisation, or the cost of deploying it within your organisation, the training that's required can often be quite expensive. So we managed to build a programme that's running now in a national sense across Scotland. Again, we'd encourage all of you that are interested in it, because it has an online component and a physical component to it. The physical component is mobile, so we can bring parts of that. We brought a very small part of it here today, but we can bring parts of that back to Shetland in the future to run those sorts of programmes, to build the capability and the skills around passive house or retrofit solutions or whatever that may be. So a load of things in there. We've done a huge amount of work around trying to drive a more diverse construction industry, more diverse sector. We've ran about 3 different core programmes, all sit now under this Dive In programme, which is all the various components that we do around that. We've just helped the Scottish Government launch about 2 weeks ago their Equity and Inclusion Plan, which is a national strategy in terms of how to drive a more diverse, inclusive and equitable construction industry. And I touched on the Built Environment Changemakers earlier, so I won't go through that too much. We also do things like help the sector develop much better use of data. So we've always been an industry that's often worked on gut feel around a lot of things, and one of the challenges has been how do you produce good evidence around that. We now have a data dashboard that allows us to look across a whole range of different metrics. This is updated on a weekly basis, and it allows government to make decisions, it allows industry to make decisions. It's linked to the public sector procurement pipeline tool, which is a map now across Scotland that Scottish Futures Trust website hosts, that gives you a kind of forward sight, I suppose, about where a lot of that investment's coming from. Second last thing, Make It Smart Hub is our mini innovation factory on the road across the Highlands and Islands. So part of us being here today, part of what we're bringing, is to connect, I suppose, in across Scotland with all the various different regions, islands, areas that are, simply by geography, unable to spend as much time at our Hamilton facility as they might want to. So we've got components of that we can bring. We've got programmes that we run, we've got events, we've got a whole series of different things that sit in there. And heat source, I'm not going to even touch on because one of my colleagues is going to touch on that in a minute. Thank you. Apologies for having too many slides.